If you're passionate about classical education and you're looking for the next step, Hillsdale College's Diana Davis Spencer Graduate School of Classical Education is now offering 2 master's degree programs. These programs provide students with a broad philosophical, historical, literary, and pedagogical perspective on classical education. The Master of Arts in Classical Education is a 2-year, in-person program on Hillsdale's campus in Michigan, while the Master of Classical Education Leadership is a 3-year hybrid program with a 1-week summer class held at Hillsdale College. Whether you're interested in teaching, administration, or another area within the field of classical education, we're prepared to offer you a foundational, time-proven approach to your studies. We want to see your application soon. Applications must be submitted on or before December 15th, 2024 for full consideration. To learn more and submit your application, visit classicalgrad.hillsdale.edu. That's classicalgrad.hillsdale.edu.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scot Bertram.
Thanks for listening. The Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio. You also can find more information on topics and ideas discussed on this show at our website, k12.hillsdale.edu. We're joined by Damon Gibbons. He is Dean of Lower School Students and PE Faculty at Cincinnati Classical Academy in Ohio. Damon, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah.
Talking today about exercise routines in classical K-12 schools. Tell us a little bit first about yourself, your background, how you got into classical physical education.
Sure. I was fortunate enough to experience a classical education while attending a Jesuit school in Washington, Gonzaga Preparatory High School in Spokane, Washington. However, prior to that, my family lived in Wyoming, and I can remember at the public elementary school there, a pretty robust physical education class, fitness testing, juggling, the whole 9 yards. And in my youth, played baseball. My father coached, and he also signed me up for boxing at one point. So I boxed competitively for a couple of years. And, in college, I stayed active. Never in college sports. I was struggling with some shoulder injuries and whatnot. But upon graduating with a degree in ag science, I actually moved to a remote area, Creede, Colorado, and I was working on a family fly fishing guest ranch there. I became their head wrangler and their foreman of the ranch. And this was it was an incredible experience. I spent 20 years there doing just about everything you could on a place such as that. But mainly, my main role was actually teaching people horsemanship and how to ride properly, which happens to be, when you do it well, it's a very physical activity. It involves the entire body. When that's done well, and when it's done well, of course, you can trot and lope and teach others to do the same. So that was very physical. During that time, I also started a softball club in the summer months with the other employees and some townsfolk. And in the winter months, and there were plenty of them up in the mountains of Colorado, we actually started a pond hockey club that kept up with skating and stuff. So what didn't you do? Well, there's that's a good question.
Boxing, perhaps, right?
Right. I had to put that aside for a little while there. But that my role at the ranch came to an end, and my wife and I moved back to where her family was from in 2020. But back in Colorado, I had been on the local school board, and I'd always admired teachers. And so when we moved to the Midwest, I found work teaching at a small classical school in northern Kentucky, and then I got word of the opening of Cincinnati Classical Academy, and I fell in love with the idea. This is what I wanted to do. I applied, and when I was offered the position as the PE instructor, it was like a light went off. It was the job I never knew that I always wanted.
So clearly, you've done a lot of athletic activity, outdoors activity throughout your life. Why the affinity for, or this focus on, the exercise routine, as we'll talk about today?
So the exercise routines, that's a big part and a first part of the lesson plan in classical PE, and it came to my attention early on that this is going to be really difficult to teach these kids this, to hold their attention and gain their cooperation and get them to put forth their best efforts. It's just going to be difficult because firstly, if we look at exercise routine, that exercise, it's work, it's hard, and it's difficult. And it's meant to be, hard and difficult. And many of these kids are completely foreign to the idea, to the concept, to the paradigm that they may want to do something that's hard and difficult for its own sake, right? And too often, if they run up against something that they can't do or they don't master right away, their automatic attitude is, repulsion, distaste, or let's not do that. And in fact, a lot of adults, we tend to be the same way, right? So there's the fact that exercise is by its nature hard and difficult. And then the routine. So I love doing this, in classical education, we look at the word itself. So the Latin root, rupta, or its synonym via, means road or way opened by force. And route also took the sense of a regular course or a customary path. And so you put exercise and routine together, and you get essentially it becomes a regular and repeatable way to and through that which is hard and difficult, and for its own sake, right? Or as we grow up to understand, actually, it's for the sake of making everything, other things, I should say, easier, such as climbing the stairs without being out of breath.
Sure.
So who wouldn't want a way, to and through that? Turns out school children, they can't be necessarily convinced right away.
So what are ways to encourage them to do that, which is hard, difficult, or routine? Okay,
well, it turns out that's what we do in classical education. We happen to be masters at this in the classroom, right? For things that aren't physical education. So through Hillsdale Classical K-12 pedagogy, we train students with choral response by reciting things, by repeating and that answer back. We found that that's very effective. We've known this for a long time. So. And we also understand the benefit of cross-curricular work. So in an effort to put the two together, what we kind of developed in the gym was this cross-curricular cadence. So for instance, a jumping jack, right? A 2-beat motion, arms up, legs out, one motion, arms in, legs, or arms down, legs in, second motion, right? So you put two of those, and so that's a 2-beat, 1, 2. You put two of those together, you make a 4-beat, 1, 2, 3, 4. And for purposes of creating a callback motion, instead of just saying 1, 2, 3, 4, which gets rather mundane and brainless, you can bring in multiples. So for the first 3 beats, we might use our school colors, so something other than 1, 2, 3, 4 to think about. And they happen to be navy, maroon, gold. So and say we're going to use multiples of 7, middle schoolers, or maybe with K through 2, we use odd or even numbers, but so it would sound something like this: navy, maroon, gold, 7, navy, maroon, gold, 14, navy, maroon, with them answering back the multiples, right? So we each get a chance to breathe and we each get a chance to think and it's that choral response, right? It sounds very military, and it works really well. And the kids, they love it. So their involvement in that, rather than just telling them to do it and watching and making sure they're doing it, their involvement on that serves in part as a mental challenge and perhaps a distraction from the physical discomfort of what they're doing. But really, it also serves as a meter, right? Or a rhythm. So moving your body in rhythm is a great segue, a great scaffold, as we say in education, to dance, which is another part of our curriculum, both in music classes and in PE. And it's also an opportunity for them to excel at that rhythm, that meter, that callback, and because of their excelling, for us to recognize that and for them to become, for us to foster leadership, right? So they become, they can lead the exercise routine, and they tend to respond. So.
Do you keep that same routine or similar routines throughout the school year?
Well, I would say similar, right? But there are a few tenets of classical education, and one of them is that things become increasingly complex and increasingly difficult. So the quarter, you don't want to change it every day, every week. You want them to know something to get good at. But about every school quarter, right? Every 8-9 weeks is a good time to step it up a little bit, to revamp it, and maybe weed out some of those that aren't as effective or for whatever reason, and to bring in some more challenging ones. Yeah.
You alluded to this. Are there ways throughout this exercise routine process to acknowledge those students that are doing particularly well? I don't want to say promote, but promote those to leadership roles in the gym, in the classroom?
Right, absolutely. So when I introduce at the beginning of the year or at a new quarter, I've got to lead the exercise routines. They've got to see me doing it. I've got to call out that rhythm and introduce the cadences, and therefore I've got to be kind of fit to do that. But that that usually takes about a week, and then I'm able to kind of step back, and by that time I've seen who's doing it well. So yeah, I'll say at the beginning of the day, introduce. I'd shake their hands as they come in the classroom. eye contact, and I'm learning their names, and they're doing an instant activity, and then we call them together. And then I'll recognize 5 days in the school week, and we strive to have physical education every day for every child. So so that's an opportunity. Really, 5 days. I could bring up 2 leaders. I can recognize 10 people out of every class to lead one day. So bringing them up and having them model for the kids and call out that cadence, and they love that. They and it fosters leadership in them, and the kids will be begging their teachers for the opportunity to lead, and so then you get to come back with, well, I'm still not sure you're on rhythm here. This is what I'm watching. You're getting distracted, or you're not doing all 10 of these or whatever. So it's a great built-in motivator and absolutely a way to recognize.
What makes an exercise program like this unique to a classical physical education?
That's a good question. Right. It's going back to those tenets of physical education. It's something that students begin to desire to do and be a part of. The first tenet is that classical physical education aims to have students desire participation in physical activity. And so we've talked about that. We're designing this so that they want to do well. It's something they want to lead. And you're, when you're not leading anymore as a PE instructor, you're going around, we're not leading the workout. You're going around and complimenting them and encouraging them and or correcting their form, And that's the second tenet, is that we should teach proper movement of the form. So if, the scoop squats is one of those that, what we're actually teaching, although we may or may not tell them, depending on their grade level, is how to properly pick up heavy stuff without hurting yourself, And so we'll reinforce that, this is where your feet should be and your knees. And we down, scoop, up, 1, down, scoop, up, 2, eyes forward, back straight. This is how we do it. So that's the proper form. And it helps them to really want that. It's challenging, it's self-motivating, it encourages leadership, and those are all values that we explicitly list in the among the tenets of classical physical education.
There are schools that perhaps are de-emphasizing or even eliminating programs like this, physical education. You just mentioned you try to do this every day for students in some manner. What are those schools missing out on if they're de-emphasizing or reducing the amount of time that students get with physical education?
Oh, there's a whole body of research out there on the benefits of this physical activity and this cardiovascular activity. Spark is one of the books that's been promoted a lot lately. I'm probably going to forget the author's name. I want to say Ratley. But what they miss and what our teachers' aides and teachers have told us directly is, when I begin to lose the attention and the cooperation of my students in class, and they go to your PE class, they come back in, and many of them, red, flush-faced, a little bit of sweat, hair wet, still breathing hard sometimes. They come back in, they sit down, and I've got them again, and I can focus them, and we can make progress. We can all do something together, The other thing, really, during PE class, we're teaching them how how to have recess. We're teaching them how to have a more productive recess.
Yeah.
And so unbeknownst to them, we're giving them physical education homework is, well, now go play four square out, in the parking lot during recess with your team. We've given you the rules. We've set it up for you. So as kids, you don't have to waste any time arguing over the rules of what we're going to play today. You all just learned it in PE class. And so they're missing out on that too, the making their recess time and all their physical time more productive by getting that training. So all the educational benefit of getting the blood going during the day, the physical activity, what it does to their focus, what it does to their attention, to their mental acuity, as well as the reciprocal benefit of these children begin to identify as physical beings and as that physicality needing exercise and that being totally appropriate and natural. Once
they get into this routine, do you encourage them to keep it up during weekends, holidays, those times away from school?
I have. Yeah, I have. And this is the easiest homework to ever assign. And it comes back to us. The parents will say, my child came home and had us all doing dead bugs or Supermans or whatever for the younger kids or showing us these squat jumps that they learned, and schooling the parents and maybe the cousins and the neighbor kids, on how to do this or that, because these are little skills that they've picked up. It has this reciprocal effect through their family and in their lives, we hope.
Yeah. Where might a new PE teacher go to find enough exercises to build the routines needed for an entire school year and possibly for many different grade levels?
It's a lot, right? And it's rather intimidating to think. I mean, teachers already they've got their lesson plan to plan, how are they going to do this? Hopefully they're able to put a little time in the summer. So what we're looking for here, though, is an exercise library, specifically a calisthenic exercise library, right? Because you're not breaking out a bunch of weights for these kids,
right.
and everything's body weight. So originally, classical physical education kind of has as its model the La Sierra routine, which was a favorite and pointed to by President Kennedy. And it's great. It's for its rigor, right? It was a 12-minute warm up and all these things. However, we've got to remember and that was a male-only program, and it predated a lot of what we now understand about injury prevention techniques, namely, hamstring strengthening and knee stabilization exercises. So we also draw from Erwin LaCour's MoveNat book and Anderson and Newport's Original Strength series. But one of my recent favorite resources is actually a website called Dareby. And they have an exercise library with tons of short videos demonstrating the different motions, and you can search by categories. So if you've got them doing a plank, what's next? Well, you can enter plank and see the different variations on the plank, or for that matter, the squat, or the push-ups, and that all comes up. So, and as you're building this out for a school year, you remember that in the first quarter, you're going to start with some pretty basic motions, and then you're going to build up more complex and more complex. So it's all out there. You can find these things, and adding complexity is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Any other advice that you might have for colleagues or for those new or perhaps even considering becoming a classical physical education teacher?
Yeah, we're at the K-12 summer conference right now, and we're reminded about wonder a lot. We talk about joy. We talk about wonder, and it's not just in passing. We're serious about it, and I think we do well to sometimes just bask in wonder ourselves. And I feel like I was very blessed to get into this job. I can't imagine a higher calling than helping students understand themselves as embodied souls, and finding virtue, strength, ability, and grace through it and in this body that they inhabit. And then making that, habituating that, making that who they are through the repetition of it. And then hopefully being able to express it later in life, perhaps in dance or, athletic competition, but hopefully gaining the understanding, and giving to these kids the understanding that they're physical by nature, and giving them a way to express themselves regularly in healthy physical ways, that'll bring them joy in any phase in their life. And so my advice to those new teachers is to keep that in mind. Find a mantra to that effect, and it's all throughout our curriculum essay in the K-12 program guide that we're issued. The philosophy is all there, but find that and post it on your wall and remind yourself of that on a daily basis. If you're having a good day with the kids, or maybe a lesson plan didn't go as you planned, or maybe sometimes, like all of us, we wonder, am I effective at all? Just remind that, refer back to it, and draw your strength from that. Because it's true. It'll come back to you. You'll hear if you're doing this, if you're adhering to the hard and the difficult for its own sake, and building virtue in that way, it'll come back to you. It'll show, and you'll just get great fulfillment from this line of work.
Damon Gibbons is Dean of Students for Lower School and PE Faculty at Cincinnati Classical Academy in Ohio, as we talk exercise routines in classical K-12. Damon, thanks so much for joining us here on the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Scott.
I'm Scot Bertram. We invite you to like us on Facebook. Search for Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education. You also can follow us on Instagram at Hillsdale_K-12. That's Hillsdale_K-12 on Instagram. Thank you for listening to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio.